I wrote my kids a letter this year, and I read it to them at the beginning of the school year. That this is not all of it. These are a couple of excerpts from it. And so my students are my monsters. Years ago we had an Olympics, and my class named themselves Maya's Monsters, so that's why I address them in this way. It has continued through the years. So I realized that I care less about what you learn and more about how you learn it. And I said to them, I want you to know how you learn best, because this is ridiculously important. It's more important than anything else you can learn. Everybody learns differently, and knowing how you personally learn best gives you so much power over your experience in school. Now, don't worry, that asterisk about what, the bottom of the letter says, yes, I care that you know your multiplication facts, and spelling does matter on your final drafts and things like that. So there is, that expectation of certain things you will learn, but I really want you to know how you learn it best. And do you learn it best by standing up at a standing desk and having a swinging bar? Do you learn it best by walking down the hallway, talking to someone, laying on your belly in the meeting area? All of those things about who you are, bring that. I know that I'm not a good teacher if I'm too hot or if I'm hungry. And so I eat all day, and I invite them to eat when they need to. I try to promise never to teach with my mouth full, and I'm mostly successful. And they'll even look at me sometimes and say, you're a little bit grumpy. Do you need to change your shoes? And I'll shift to these. But they know. And so just by having those conversations and modeling that we learn differently, that we have different kinds of needs, that we need to address those to be able to be successful and effective, and to enjoy our days together. So, we do heritage projects where the kids do personal timelines. So before we do a timeline for immigration about when airplanes were invented and telephones and all these pieces that help us contextualize our study, they do a personal timeline about the things in their lives that were important, those seminal moments. Was it getting a dog? Was it somebody passing away? Was it being born? What are the things that were important? And so they create these personal timelines and illustrate them. They interview their families and bring that information in and share it with the class and present what they learned about their own family. We do writing projects. They're I Believe essays, and so there's a NPR show, This I Believe, and they listen to excerpts of it, and they listen to an interview of I think he was 5 or 7, and he made a list of 100 things he believed for his birthday. And I share that with them, and then they come up with their lists of things they believe, and then eventually they write a piece about that. And we have some interesting conversations about the things that they believe. Some of them also like to write it as, I used to believe, but now I know. So I used to believe that rocks were alive. I couldn't understand how rocks weren't alive if trees are. They seemed like they should both be alive, and I share that with the kids. Now I know that they're not. They do move, though. I also have a piece in my classroom that's based on the Google 80-20 time, where I give them time to do their own projects about anything. Maybe they're really interested in some particular thing that doesn't happen to be part of our immigration time, and they learn about it, and they find a way to present it back to the class, and they have to do some talking about it and have some sort of an artifact or a spoken word piece or something that they've done to show what they learned. And so I've learned so much about strange species and how circuit boards work and all kinds of things from the kids, because they're fascinated by all kinds of interesting things. Our school has something called open work, where kids can work on all different kinds of projects. The investment isn't as deep as my choice projects are, though it is deep. The choice projects have more research component to them than open work does. Open work could be learning how to weave or knit, or working with woodworking or wire sculpture or something like that. We do a lot of free writing in my classroom. We play. And we also did a play one year where they wrote a script, and this was a group of kids who said to me, I want to do a play. And I said, well, I've never even been in a school play, so you're going to have to work with me on this, because I can't pull that off by myself. And so we did it together, and I was sort of the director, but they were the ones who decided who got each role based on their acting skills, and they did that. And I also experiment with kids at certain points in the year, certain points in units. They get to a place where they structure their day. They decide, I'm going to read for 30 minutes here, and I'm going to do that math game over here, and I'm going to work with my other group over here. And they get a schedule at the beginning of the day that's blank, and they fill in what they're going to do when, and they have to make an appointment with this one because they're their revision partner, and make an appointment with a group of kids to play a math game or whatever. So these are 9, 10, and 11-year schedules. 9, 10, and 11-year-olds scheduling their own day and figuring out what time of day do I want to read. And so there are some things that I say, I am meeting with this guided reading group at this time, so you do need to come to that if you're in that group. But for the most part, they schedule their own time. Because we're all different and we all have different needs. And I want them to feel like they know themselves and they know how to meet their own needs. I mean, isn't that what we all want in our lives, right? Is to know what we need and figure out how to meet our own needs, or have other people meet them with us. I want to talk a little bit about routines in my classroom that support this sense of us all being who we are in this space. When we sit in the meeting area, we're sitting on the floor. I'm at the same level as them. The first couple weeks, I sit in the same spot each day, and then I move. And it gets us all listening around the circle to different voices. As I mentioned before, some kids want to stand to do independent work, and others want to sprawl on their bellies. We do mindfulness 3 times a day. It's initially run by me, and then it's run by kids. So they decide what the mindfulness will be. They're the ones in charge of the singing bowl, and they talk their classmates from wild, full-on energy of after recess to a place where we can start mindfulness and be steady and quiet. They work on having conversations without an adult leader, whether that's a whole group lesson, and being able to have a conversation as 25 people is difficult in any circumstance, but when your kids finding the way to do that, to actually look at body language of who else wants to say something and notice that, to agree that if we started speaking at the same time, one of us needs to back down and give space to the other. They learn how to run small groups in ways where they might decide one person's going to chair, or that everyone's going to go around and say their idea before anybody responds. So we talk about the different ways to structure things, and they try to do that. And it's hard and it's messy at first, and it has to be to try to work through it. Learning is messy. As a quick aside, I feel like often schools have this goal of not having conflict in their schools, that kids shouldn't get into fights and have conflict, and the reality is they have to, because that's how we learn how to handle conflict, and conflict arises in any setting. And so our goal is at odds with kids learning how to handle conflict well. For birthdays, we tell everybody on their birthday for the closing meeting, we say, one of the things that we love about having you in the community is this, and everybody says something to them about what they bring to our community that makes our community a better place. And we do kindness pals. They partner up with people. It's so easy for us to notice the transgressions, the mean things that people do, the unconscious things that hurt our feelings, but we're not very good at noticing the kindnesses that people do to us. We take them for granted. So we have a practice where for the full week, if we're partners, I'm noticing everything kind that you do. And in Friday's meeting, I'll tell the group what you did that was kind, and if I didn't notice something, you'll add it to the list. So these are the little things that we do to just have everybody be seen for who they are and feel like they can bring themselves to the space. How am I doing on time? Okay, great. Yeah, so I guess I wanted to take a few minutes just to answer any questions if anybody wanted to ask about anything that I said in this. And then I'm just going to put this slide up while we're doing that, which is, I feel like it's important for us to share what we're reading and what influences our practice as teachers. And these 3 books are the first 2 I read recently, and they've really shifted things in my practice, and I'm in the middle of reading Troublemakers right now, and boy, do I love having time on the subway to read. So any questions?
Thanks, Maya. I'm wondering, of these routines and practices that you do in the classroom, how much of them actually transition to the family dynamic? And do you help facilitate that with the parents as well?
I try to share with the families my beliefs about things like this in ways, but one thing I can say is that through the years since I added mindfulness into the classroom, the first I heard was an athlete who before his meets, he was a gymnast, he started stopping and doing a moment of mindfulness before he would start each event. And his mom said it became such an important part of his competitions, and he was doing quite well. I think mindfulness is the thing that I see parents take in the most. Recently, a family asked me if I would purchase a mindfulness bowl for them because they couldn't find one that they liked the sound of. So they gave me money and asked me to purchase it for them.
Maya, can I add something as a parent?
Yeah.
The Earth School is unusual in that parents are invited into the school. And so when you walk through the hall and you see these poems and drawings in front of all the classrooms, there's an opportunity to really learn about not only your own child, but also the children that she goes to school with, and the process that they use of going about exploring their community. And I think that that's a unique feature of the approach that the school takes.
Yeah, I think that parent access piece, it's the only school I've ever taught in. And I don't know how I would have the relationships that I do with families. I also teach my students for 2 years. It's not looping, but I have 4th and 5th grade simultaneously, and half of my class graduates each year, and I get a new half the following fall. So the relationships are deep, but that ability to see parents each day at the door and have a shorthand conversation, and they're welcome to come in, stay for mindfulness. You know, come on in and check out what we're doing. I think that is a big piece of sharing that.
I'm trying to get my head around how you as a teacher manage 25 children creating their own schedules and still teaching. And I heard you say that, you know, they have to plan around you maybe with one
or two things. Yeah, one or two things they'll have to plan around me. I'm going to say the biggest word in it is trust. A couple of years ago, one of the kids said in a meeting, I said, you know, how's it going? We were reflecting on it. How's it going? We'd done it for a couple of days. And he said, well, what if somebody doesn't do the work? And I said, are you worried that you won't do the work? And he said, no, I'm doing it. I'm worried about other people. And so I said, is anybody not doing the work? And everybody said, well, I didn't have enough time to finish X, Y, or Z. And I said, right, you'll have more time to work on that tomorrow. Like, I have to carefully monitor how much stuff I put on the list of things I'd like them to spend some time with that day. You know, I am saying you do need to read for 30 minutes. You do need to, you know, depending on what it is, you do need to spend some time working on your timeline today or whatever the piece is. But I'm walking around, and they write a reflection at the end. There are always questions to reflect at the end of the day, and I give them time to do that reflecting. So I read those and see, and it'll say, like, is there anything you had a hard time with? Is there anything you didn't get to today? So that gives me a window. But it's never really gone badly. You know, there are a couple kids who've tried the first week or so, like, hey, do I really have to do this? You know, there's always one or two, right? And ultimately, the investment has to be there, the engagement. It's not something I do the first week of school. It probably won't start until December or January. But once we get there, then they get annoyed when I tell them, no, today we've got a schedule because I have all these things that we need to be whole group for. So.
Thank you so much. One other observation I want to share is that just as I noticed Maya in the first days and weeks in the school, the other thing that struck me was that within the first week, it felt like all the adults in the school know all the children. So lest you think that Maya is an anomaly, she's a shining example of the culture that exists in that school. And the way that that filters down to the kids is that they also all know all the adults, and they know each other, regardless of the grade. And the school goes to great length to facilitate that through reading buddies. What's the project called where the fifth graders help out?
The fifth grade leadership jobs. So we have fifth graders sign up and apply for jobs, and they do things like lead a math group in a first and second grade classroom. They help the pre-K kids with their coats. They facilitate different kinds of activities around the school.
And all of this is to say that each educator will interpret the culture of authenticity in her or his unique way. But the culture has to be fostered in the school, and it has to be an intentional approach. And that's one of the things that I hope that we'll continue to talk about is how do we do that? How do we bring this excellent work to more and more schools as a real cultural shift? So thank you very much.